Most people worry about money in the wrong way. They worry about the price of eggs today. They worry about gas prices next week. They worry about who is shouting the loudest in the White House. But while you're distracted by the noise, the United States Treasury, combined with the Federal Reserve, has locked in a mathematical inevitability. We are not just heading toward a recession. We are heading toward a cliff. And unlike a recession, which is a vague economic mood that happens gradually, this cliff has a schedule. It has a timetable. And most terrifying of all, it has specific hard-coded dates. We are currently sitting on a $38 trillion sovereign debt bubble that runs into a wall of 5 specific deadlines in the year 2026. These are not predictions. I'm not looking into a crystal ball. These are legislated, contractual explosions that are written into the US tax code and the corporate bond market. If you rely on a salary, a 401k, or the value of the US dollar to survive, you need to mark these 5 dates on your calendar right now. Because when the clock strikes midnight on these deadlines, the rules of the American economy change forever. This is the timeline of the squeeze. Before we get to the first date, you have to understand the trap we are in. For the last 40 years, the American economy has run on a simple engine called cheap debt. When the government needed money, it borrowed it at near 0% interest. When corporations needed to buy back their stock to pump up your 401k, they borrowed it at 2%. It was free money. It created the illusion of wealth. It made everyone feel like a genius investor. But that era ended in 2022. The Federal Reserve raised rates to fight inflation, and now the entire system is resetting to a new reality. The problem is the debt didn't go away. The debt is still there, waiting to be refinanced. And in 2026, the bill comes due. We are looking at a convergence of tax resets, corporate refinancing walls, and a sovereign debt spiral all hitting within the same 12-month window. It is a perfect storm that has been mathematically programmed into the system. Date number 1 is January 1st, 2026. The automatic middle-class tax reset. You might know this as New Year's Day. But in the Internal Revenue Code, this is the expiration of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2017. For the last 8 years, the American middle class has been living in a temporary tax shelter. The 2017 law lowered individual income tax rates. It doubled the child tax credit, and most importantly, it nearly doubled the standard deduction. But there was a catch. Because of the rules of the Senate, that law was written with a sunset clause. It was designed to die on December 31st, 2025. So, the moment the ball drops in Times Square to ring in 2026, one of the largest automatic tax increases in history happens by default. Congress does not need to pass a new law to raise your taxes. They just have to do what they do best, which is nothing. Here is the specific math of what happens to your wallet. First, individual income tax brackets snap back to pre-2018 levels. This means for many workers, your effective tax rate jumps by 3 to 4 percentage points overnight. That might not sound like much, but on a $50,000 salary, that is significant. Second, and this is the killer, the standard deduction gets roughly cut in half. Right now, a married couple can earn nearly $30,000 before they pay a single cent of federal tax. On January 1st, absent a new law, that protection drops to roughly $15,000. Suddenly, $15,000 of your income that used to be tax-free is exposed to the IRS. That is money that used to go to your mortgage, your groceries, or your savings. Now it goes to Washington. Third, the child tax credit reverts. If you have a family, the credit per child drops from $2,000 down to $1,000. That is direct cash out of your pocket. And for the small business owners listening to this, the famous QBI deduction, the 20% write-off for pass-through businesses vanishes. This removes billions of dollars of spending power from the economy on day one of the year. It is a demand shock. You will have less money to spend, which means businesses make less revenue, which leads us directly into the crisis of date number 2. Date number 2 is May 15th, 2026. The refinancing shock. While the American family is struggling with a new tax reality, corporate America faces a crisis of liquidity. May 15th, 2026 marks the end of Jerome Powell's current term as chairman of the Federal Reserve. Markets hate uncertainty, and historically, when a Fed chair's term ends during economic turmoil, it creates extreme volatility in the bond market. But the real story here isn't the man, it's the math. May 2026 is the epicenter of the corporate maturity wall. For the last decade, major U.S. companies survived by borrowing cheap money at 3% interest. But those loans are now maturing. They have to pay them back. The problem is they don't have the cash, so they have to refinance. But in 2026, they aren't borrowing at 3%. They are borrowing at 7, 8, or 10%. There's a massive wave of speculative gray debt, what we call junk bonds, maturing in 2026. These are companies that are barely profitable. When their interest payments double or triple, they turn into zombie companies. They have been kept alive by cheap money, and when that life support is cut off in May, the math stops working. We expect a wave of corporate restructuring to begin in the second quarter of 2026. This is when the layoffs move from the tech sector to the manufacturing and retail sectors. When companies can't pay their debts, the first thing they cut is labor. That means you. Date number 3 is July 28th, 2026, the interest dominance phase. This date marks a projected tipping point for the U.S. federal budget. By the summer of 2026, analysts project the U.S. national debt will be forcing a new reality on the Treasury. The total number of the debt doesn't matter as much as the cost to service it. We are approaching a historic crossover point where the annualized cost to pay interest on the debt surpasses the entire U.S. defense budget. Think about that. We will be spending more to pay off yesterday's bondholders than we spend to defend the country today. This triggers a phenomenon known as crowding out. Because the government is so desperate for cash to pay this interest, they have to suck up all the available capital in the economy. They have to issue more bonds. To get you to buy them, they have to offer higher interest rates. This pushes mortgage rates up. It pushes auto loans up. It pushes small business loans up. The government becomes a black hole that sucks the life out of the private economy. To pay the interest, they eventually have to print money. Printing money causes inflation. Inflation raises interest rates. It is a feedback loop. And in the summer of 2026, that loop tightens. Date number 4 is October 1st, 2026, the liquidation phase. October 1st is the start of the federal fiscal year 2027. This is the date where the hidden crisis in our entitlement system becomes a public liquidity problem. You often hear that Social Security is going insolvent in the 2030s. That is true, but the crisis starts now. In 2026, the Social Security trust funds enter a phase of accelerated drawdown. Because there are more baby boomers retiring than workers paying in, the system is cash flow negative. To pay the benefits promised for the 2027 fiscal year, the Social Security Administration has to sell its assets. But what assets does it own? It holds US Treasury bonds. It has to sell those bonds back to the US Treasury to get cash. But the Treasury doesn't have the cash. Remember date number 3? They are broke paying interest. So, to pay Grandma her check on October 1st, the Treasury has to go out to the public market and borrow new money to pay off the old bonds held by Social Security. This is the definition of a debt spiral. It forces the Treasury to flood the market with new debt exactly when there are fewer buyers. This is the moment where credit rating agencies start asking the hard questions. If the U.S. credit rating gets downgraded again during this budget window, it forces pension funds to sell, crashing the bond market. And when the bond market crashes, your safe retirement portfolio crashes with it. Date number 5 is December 9th, 2026. The policy capitulation risk. This is the scheduled date of the final Federal Open Market Committee meeting of 2026. By December, the taxes have gone up, corporate refinancing is hitting a wall, and the Treasury is drowning in interest payments. The Federal Reserve will face the same choice that every over-indebted empire has faced in history. Choice A: keep interest rates high to fight inflation, which creates a depression and bankrupts the U.S. government. Choice B: sacrifice the dollar to save the system. History tells us they usually choose B. We view late 2026 as the window for financial repression or yield curve control. This is where the Fed steps in and prints whatever is necessary to buy the government debt and artificially lower interest rates. This stops the government from going bankrupt, but there is a price. When you print money to suppress rates while inflation is historically sticky, you debase the currency. On this date, the stock market might actually skyrocket. But do not be fooled. It is a crack-up boom. The numbers in your account go up. The Dow Jones might hit record highs, but the value of that money buys less and less. A loaf of bread costs more. Insurance costs more. You have more money, but you are poorer than ever before. This is the final transfer of wealth from the savers to the debtors. So, looking at 2026, you see the pincer movement. On January 1st, the automatic tax reset squeezes your income. In May, the refinancing wall threatens the job market. In December, the policy response threatens the currency itself. The system is engineered to squeeze the middle class until there is nothing left. But here's the good news. You have roughly 18 to 24 months before this timeline executes fully. You have a window of opportunity. If you're sitting in cash, you're the fuel for the fire. If you're sitting in a standard 60-40 stock portfolio, you're exposed to the bond market volatility. You need to become anti-fragile. Historically, during periods of financial repression, like the 1940s, real assets perform best. Assets that do not have a maturity wall. Assets that do not depend on a Congress passing a budget. Gold, productive land, and decentralized assets have historically acted as lifeboats when the sovereign treasury starts taking on water. The calendar is ticking. The dates are set in law. The only variable left is you. Are you going to watch the dates approach, paralyzed? Or are you going to move? Most people will close this video and go back to sleep. They will wake up on January 1st, 2026, and wonder why their paycheck is smaller. Don't be most people. We are building a community of people who are paying attention. If you want to survive the 2026 transition, you need to be subscribed to this channel. I want you to do 3 things right now. First, subscribing is mandatory. If you're not subscribed, the algorithm will hide these updates from you. You need this information before the headlines break, not after. Second, hit the like button. This helps break the shadow ban and forces the algorithm to show this warning to other people who need to hear it. And third, share this video. Send it to the person who thinks everything is fine. You owe it to them to show them the cliff before they drive over it. The clock is ticking. 2026 is coming. I'll see you in the next one.